How convenient. And now to an example of the sort of behaviour that makes so many people long for tougher regulation of the media, in print, on TV and online.
Unmasked. Tristan Barker, Australia's worst internet troll, being investigated by police.
Jonathan Marshall in Rotorua, New Zealand.
You may remember Jonathan Marshall. He's one of News Limited's young guns, their network investigations editor, no less. After a controversial career in New Zealand, he made the big time in Australia last year by secretly recording that notorious speech when Alan Jones said that Julia Gillard's father had died of shame. From unmasking an old troll, Marshall is now unmasking a young one.
Tristan Barker has used internet portals, Facebook and Twitter to encourage harassment and ridicule of everyone from Muslims, businesses, local and overseas celebrities, murder victims, and people who have committed suicide as a result of online bullying. I would consider myself an entertainer, he boasted.
Now, as we all know, nothing fuels a tabloid news story like moral indignation, and Tristan Barker at first sight deserves plenty. A classic attention-seeking 18-year-old, his foul-mouthed rants on Facebook are provocative to say the least. But there's more to them than you'd guess from News's graphic.
Tristan Barker's vilest outbursts. Cyberbullying victim Amanda Todd. In a 10-minute rant, Barker labelled the 16-year-old US cyberbullying and suicide victim as slutty, attention-seeking, and a histrionic attention whore.
Well, yes, he did. But he also had a message for his hundreds of thousands of young Facebook fans that wasn't vile at all.
And instead of complaining about what's going on right now, how about you go out there and you find a sad kid, you find someone who's sitting on their own, someone who's having an issue, and you have a word with them, and maybe just let them hang out with you. Maybe that's going to prevent more suicide than talking about Amanda Todd is.
That's the good side of Tristan Barker, but we're not denying that he and his so-called Facebeef team have a nasty side too. So it's not young Mr. Barker we're concerned about tonight. As we'll see shortly, he and his mates can look after themselves. It's the ethics of Jonathan Marshall of News Limited and the culpable sloppiness of Today Tonight. First, Marshall. After unmasking Tristan Barker as a super troll, he turned his attention to Barker's parents. On March the 4th, Jonathan Marshall reported,
The teenager's father has now been criticised after commenting on his son's views, particularly about United States teenager Amanda Todd, who hanged herself in October 2012. When News Limited spoke to Mr. Barker Sr. about his son's views, he said, Was she? Was she slutty and attention-seeking?
With that quote, Marshall had himself a story, because Michael Barker, Tristan's father, is a minor celebrity, the drummer in the band Split Enz. And as Marshall reported, he was
to play with his two-man blues and roots group, The Swamp Thing, at this weekend's 4-day Womadelaide Music Festival.
But not if Marshall could help it.
Womadelaide Festival organisers are facing pressure to dump a lead act after one of the band's two members made derogatory comments about a suicide victim.
In fact, Marshall had busied himself ringing Womadelaide sponsors to ask if they were outraged by the quote, and the Womadelaide Festival organisers to ask if they were going to drop Swamp Thing from their bill. Festival director Ian Scobie tells Media Watch,
The story that Womadelaide was considering dropping Swamp Thing was, in my view, an invention of Jonathan's.
The pressure was successfully resisted. Swamp Thing played at Womadelaide. But it seems the whole story may have been based on a deception. Michael Barker's wife Kathy was with him when he answered Marshall's questions. They both say that they had no idea they were being asked about a well-known suicide victim. Marshall only asked them,
What do you think of Tristan's comments on the internet calling a girl slutty and attention-seeking?
Mike asked, well, was she? As Jonathan Marshall did not say it was anyone in particular, let alone Amanda Todd.
Is that true? As we'll see, the interview was covertly recorded. But despite asking, so far we haven't been able to hear or view the recording. Meanwhile, Today Tonight's David Eccleston got in on the act. He travelled to New Zealand to meet Tristan Barker, who'd got himself up in a Nazi uniform for the occasion. Back in Australia, it got an even better break. An email from a certain Jasmine Frost complaining she'd been cyberbullied by Tristan Barker. An interview with the young woman was quickly organised and shot in a park in Melbourne.
He said you're a ugly mole who has a low-life job. It's going nowhere. You might as well just kill yourself now.
But according to text messages sent to Media Watch by the young woman, it wasn't until transmission day last Monday that the producer asked Jasmine,
Did you by any chance have or keep any screen grabs of Tristan's abuse?
Hey Naomi, sorry, unfortunately I don't.
Hey Jasmine, no problem at all. Don't worry about it.
But Today Tonight should have worried about it. Because, as the woman whose real name is Jasmine Van Middy gleefully revealed in a Facebeef YouTube video, she was one of them. TT had been hoaxed.
And all it took was an email entitled, Tristan Barker cyberbullied me. And then a 3-minute phone call to convince one of the most watched and believed news programs in Australia that I was a poor, bullied girl.
Red faces at Today Tonight. But once again, the real victim was Tristan's father. David Eccleston put the knife into Michael Barker. His weapon was provided by News Limited's Jonathan Marshall.
Michael Barker, I think, has got a lot to answer for. He's clearly aware of what his son's doing. We've put it to his attention. It's been across the news media for the last 2 weeks. Yet he's encouraging it.
News Limited investigations journalist Jonathan Marshall secretly filmed Tristan's parents at their home. You'd expect him to protect his son, but not to be seen to endorse his views. Asked about the Amanda Todd suicide, where his son labelled her an attention-seeking whore, Michael Barker said this.
An attention whore who deserved what she got for playing the victim.
You notice that we couldn't actually see Michael Barker saying anything. He told Media Watch,
The voice heard in the Today Tonight saying an attention whore who deserved what she got for playing the victim is most definitely not me, Michael Barker. It is actually Jonathan Marshall.
Remarkably, Today Tonight and Marshall's editor at News Limited have both now confirmed that. It's not Michael Barker's voice, it's Jonathan Marshall's. David Eccleston wasn't involved in the editing, says Today Tonight's executive producer, and adds,
We regret the oversight.
Oversight. One thing we do know, Jonathan Marshall turned up uninvited at the Barkers' home in New Zealand in February and secretly videoed them. And according to Kathy Barker, he lied about it.
At one point during the questioning, Mike asked Jonathan, Are you recording us? Jonathan was shaking and said, No.
And in a later phone conversation, Michael Barker says Marshall denied again that he'd recorded the conversation. A man's reputation has been thoroughly trashed. Is News Limited's Jonathan Marshall responsible for deceptive, dishonest journalism? Is Today Tonight? Are both of them? Jonathan Marshall's executive editor has thanked us for raising these issues.
We are treating them very seriously and have started a formal investigation with the journalist involved.
Perhaps they realise at News Limited that this isn't the time to be providing more arguments for tougher media regulation. Until next week, good night.